I'm excited for Sam Peterson to make this presentation for us. Sam is a transgender advocate on a variety of subjects. He's a two-time published author. Sam is also our DCRC rape prevention educator, and really does a lot in the community to educate on rape prevention and healthy relationships, and an all-around great guy and wonderful speaker. So allow me to now introduce Sam Peterson.
Thank you all for being here for this really heavy topic, but I think it's so important that we get to know about this, and hopefully you'll see why once we're through. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll get going. Let's see. All right. Yeah, so May 1853 marked the final arrest of Mary Jones for grand larceny in New York City. Also known as Beefsteak Pete, Jones had gained notoriety for their publicized trial 10 years before for grand larceny related to prostitution. Jones was one of the earliest openly transgender people of color in US history, and their story helps explain why, even as American culture has become more tolerant towards LGBTQ plus people, 2020, last year, was one of the worst years of violence against trans people in US history, particularly trans women of color. Jones's story reminds us of how American culture stigmatizes trans people as counterfeit and therefore disposable. When compounded by American racism, trans women of color remain particularly vulnerable. And that's from the Washington Post. When Black trans women and Black trans femmes are free to live and lead, all transgender women of color, all Black people, all transgender people, and ultimately all people will be free. That's from the Transgender Law Center. So here's a definition of Black trans women and Black trans femmes and femmes of color. It includes a broad range of people of African descent and others who do not agree with being coercively assigned male at birth, including but not limited to binary transgender women, non-binary trans feminine people, intersex trans women, and intersex trans feminine people. Violence towards Black trans women and femmes does not limit itself to hate speech or physical violence. As we know and understand, violence is built into the very structure of our society through policing, through ICE, through the Department of Justice, and often these forms of violence are in the form of sexual assault. Jones was born in New York in 1803 at a time when the dominant American culture excluded openly gay and lesbian people. Until 1828, the legal penalty for sodomy in New York, understood then as sex between two men, was life imprisonment. Moreover, recognition of individuals as trans was largely unheard of. It would be over 100 years until the German sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld used the term transvestite, and another 60 years before such terms like transsexual and transgender come into existence. And as a result, trans people were often mislabeled as perverts and lumped into a wider category of sodomy. Trans people existed, but they faced social isolation, violence, and even death. So here are some statistics. 47% of transgender people have been sexually assaulted at some point in their lives, and these rates are even higher for people of color, those who have a disability and those who have done sex work or are homeless, and often those intersections, as we know, collide. Elements of racial subversion made Mary Jones's story that much more sensational. Reporting on another of Jones's arrests in 1842, the New York Herald referred to them as a deceiver of those with a desire for amalgamation, interracial sex. Neither prostitution nor interracial sex was illegal in New York. However, in areas like the Five Points and the Bowery where Jones worked, social conventions ensured that even illicit activities kept races separate. What repulsed the media most and drew attention from authorities was that they viewed Jones as a Black man who was violating gender and sexual and racial norms to seemingly defraud, innocent white men. Violence against Black trans women has been accurately described as a pandemic within a pandemic. Last summer, 6 Black trans women, all under the age of 32, were murdered in the span of 9 days. Their deaths are part of a horrifying pattern. Hate crimes against transgender and gender nonconforming individuals have been on the rise for years, with the number of murders in 2020 surpassing that of 2019. The majority have been Black trans women under the age of 30. Organizations like the Human Rights Campaign have released several reports detailing potential sources of this violence. In particular, Black trans women are killed at disproportionate rates because of, quote, the intersections of racism, transphobia, sexism, biphobia, and homophobia. A report from Keith Conran from CNN, from the Williams Institute at UCLA notes that the easiest answer to why Black trans women are disproportionately victims of fatal violence is that they are Black, they're transgender, and they're women. Each of those distinct identities means that they face discrimination, prejudice, and inequities on multiple fronts. Sorry for the noise. The inequities and prejudice Black and BIPOC trans women face don't just take the form of outright violence. A study by the National LGBTQ Task Force indicates that Black trans people have a 26% unemployment rate. That's twice as high as the unemployment rate for transgender people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, and 4 times as high as the unemployment rate in the general population. The study also found other shocking disparities, like 41% of Black trans people have been homeless, which is more than 5 times the general population. 34% of Black trans people have household incomes less than $10,000, which is more than 8 times the general population. And nearly half of all Black trans population has attempted suicide. Newspaper articles specifically gendered Jones as a man, and they also noted the tremendous roar and greatest merriment when a spectator snatched the flowing wig off Jones during their trial, unmasking the perceived falsehood of Jones' identity. An 1844 article expressed a more immediate danger by citing Jones' habit of, quote, enticing men and boys into alleys as, quote, terrible, revolting, and peculiar in character. Jones was therefore cast as an oddity and a devious threat. After serving a 5-year sentence for the alleged 1836 robbery, Jones would continue to be arrested for their old game for years to come, albeit with less media hype and frenzy. They would nevertheless become immortalized in this now famous lithograph as the man monster. These statistics apply to Black trans population in general and not to Black trans women specifically. Based on how much more frequently Black trans women are killed, it's reasonable to assume that they also experience these harms more frequently than other Black trans people. In short, being a Black trans woman in America means you are far more likely than most other people to experience serious roadblocks and harms in the form of everything from extreme poverty to violent murder. Community advocates speculate that half of the murders of Black trans women are due to IPV or interpersonal violence. The NCT, National Center of Transgender Equality, did this study, and they found that 56% of the respondents experienced some form of intimate partner violence, including acts of coercive control and physical violence. Transgender men, 62% were most likely to have experienced some form of IPV. More than 3/4 of the respondents who worked in the underground economy experienced intimate partner violence. Nearly 1/3 of the respondents reported acts of coercive control by an intimate partner related to their transgender status, including being told they were not a, quote, real woman or man. They were threatened with being outed by having their transgender status revealed to others, or prevented from taking their hormones. 44% experienced physical violence by an intimate partner. And just FYI, since 2013, over half of the fatal violence has occurred in the South. By February of this year, at least 7 trans people of color out of 10 altogether have been murdered. We are well on track to surpass last year's 44 murders. Nearly half of these murders are suspected to have been committed by the person's intimate partner. So again, IPV plays a big role in these murders. Close to 2 centuries between Joan's life and the present day have witnessed seismic transformations tied to gender, sexuality, race, and their intersections. Our culture has become more accepting of trans people, although that is a very recent development. And as we know, there's a lot of pushback. Individuals like Janet Mock and Laverne Cox stand at the forefront of current representation of trans women and embody a recognition of trans personhood unimaginable 2 centuries ago. Race relations in the United States have likewise undergone seismic transformations, particularly emancipation, the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and Black Lives Matter movement have embedded recognition of Black humanity into American culture. Yet, this progress has not erased the idea that bodies subverting sexual and gender norms are inauthentic and threatening. Also, existing ideas about gender binary remain tied up in assumptions about race, racial purity, hierarchy, and ultimately white supremacy. In November, a study by the Human Rights Watch concluded that more than 3/4 of the trans and non-binary people killed in the US in 2020 were people of color, with trans women of color at particular risk. This same study showed that from 2016 to 2021, between 88% and 91% of the transgender people killed in Florida, Ohio, and Texas were people of color. These statistics are especially concerning given the recent surge of white supremacy and far-right conservatism in the country. Trans people who have been abused have fewer services available to them to use, and there's bias and lack of competence in working with transgender people. As an already oppressed community, transgender individuals are often hesitant to address issues that many fear will taint the community. Transgender individuals may be cautious in approaching medical providers, police, or the courts due to the past experiences related to discrimination or abuse related to their gender or their gender expression. These individuals might fear re-victimization through transphobia, degradation, hostility, or accusations from these service providers and public safety workers. And shelters are typically male or female only. Transgender people may be excluded from shelters or emergency housing facilities because they are transgender, or be asked to show identity documents or proof of their anatomy. Fortunately, that's not what's happening here. But even in larger cities, Service providers who specially outreach to trans people may be limited. Survivors might fear losing their privacy within care settings. Transgender survivors are more likely to face threats, intimidation, harassment, and police violence as a result of IPV. Those who have, there have been a lot of custody cases lately involving trans people. The risk of losing custody of a child might also influence a trans survivor from coming forward about abusive behavior. The isolation that accompanies intimate partner violence can be compounded by being transgender or in a relationship with a transgender partner in a transphobic society. Silence about intimate partner violence within trans communities further isolates people. These are tactics that are specific to trans abusers. Exploiting partners' internalized response to homophobia, transphobia, or biphobia, hiding or throwing away hormones, clothes, etc., controlling a partner's gender expression, telling partners that they will never find another partner who treats them better, or social isolation, using pronouns that aren't preferred, or calling someone it, ridiculing how somebody's body looks, telling them they'll never pass as a woman or a man, telling someone they're not a real man or woman, telling someone that nobody would believe them because they're transgender, claiming they know what's best for someone, how they should dress or wear makeup or not, etc. Denying access to medical treatment or hormones, or coercing someone not to pursue medical treatment, hiding or throwing away hormones, binders, clothing, etc. Eroticizing, fetishizing someone's body against their will, touching body parts someone doesn't want touched, or calling them by terms they know are offensive, telling someone they thought they liked rough sex, or this is how real men or women like sex, telling somebody that nobody will ever love you, negating personal decisions, threatening to take the children, forbidding you from talking to others about transgender topics. And these are all tactics specific to transgender abusers. Assaults on trans people are no laughing matter. As the story of Mary Jones reminds us, these efforts are deeply historically rooted. This history explains why, even as our culture has become far more forward-thinking on issues of race, gender, and sexuality, trans women, especially trans women of color, continue to struggle for basic recognition of their humanity. So here's some things that we can do. Outreach, we can engage community members by getting their attention and letting them know why we're out in the community doing outreach. We can locate community members by engaging in a community mapping exercise. Community mapping is a process where organizers and advocates determine where members can be reached through outreach, apart from events and locations that are typically well outreached. We can listen to what the community members have to say about intimate partner violence and what they think about the issue. We can educate community members about this issue and let them know why they should care and why they should get involved. And we can get community members involved by taking down their names and contact information for follow-up, giving them handouts and materials to let them know how to get involved with this issue, campaign, or organization. There's a site called blacktranswomen.org that has fantastic resources and will connect people to resources in their area. And interestingly, blacktranswomen.org is Texas-based, of all places. We want a world where Black trans women and Black trans femmes are thriving and leading solutions for social, economic, and political change. Black trans women and BIPOC and trans femmes' quality of life is tied to both cultural attitudes and institutional policies. Black trans women, BIPOC, and Black trans femmes exist at multiple intersections of oppression and are uniquely singled out for criminalization by the police and government. Black trans women and Black trans femmes experience disproportionately higher rates of housing insecurity, police violence, unemployment due to discrimination based on their perceived gender and race. And all trans women of color are more marginalized than their peers. We must begin by addressing Black trans women and Black trans femmes because of the urgent need to end the epidemic of anti-Black violence. When Black trans women and Black trans femmes are free to live and lead, all trans women of color, all Black people, all transgender people, and ultimately all people will be free. So I'm going to introduce you, or maybe reintroduce you, to some trans women who are history makers, starting with Marsha P. Johnson, who was a self-identified drag queen, performer, and survivor. She was a prominent figure in the Stonewall Uprising of 1969. Marsha went by Black Marsha before settling on Marsha P. Johnson. The P stood for pay it no mind, which is what Marsha would say in response to questions about her gender. Love that. Laverne Cox. Laverne Cox, you may be familiar with. She's an Emmy-winning producer, and her last documentary, Disclosure, which she executive produced, is currently streaming on Netflix. And this is the 100 Best Documentaries of All Time by Vogue. Disclosure gives an unprecedented, groundbreaking look at the depiction of transgender characters throughout the history of film and TV. It's a great documentary, and I highly recommend it. She's an artist and an advocate with an empowering message of moving beyond gender expectations to live more authentically. Laverne is the first openly transgender person to appear on the covers of Time magazine, British Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and Essence magazine, among others. She was named one of Glamour magazine's 2014 Women of the Year. She also holds 2 SAG awards, winning them for her Orange is the New Black castmates for outstanding performance by an ensemble in a comedy series. And she has garnered Critics' Choice nomination for Best Supporting Actress and consecutive NAACP Image Award nominations. Janet Mock and Angelica Ross. Angelica Ross is an American businesswoman, actress, and transgender rights advocate. A self-taught computer coder, she went on to become the founder and CEO of Trans Tech Social Enterprise, which is a firm that helps employ trans people in the tech industry. You can find her on shows like Pose and American Horror Story. Janet Mock is a writer, director, and executive producer for the FX drama series Pose and the Netflix limited series Hollywood and Monster. She's also a New York Times bestselling author of 2 memoirs, Redefining Realness and Surpassing Certainty, about her journey as a trans woman. In 2019, Mock signed a historic deal with Netflix, making her the first trans person to sign a production pact with a major studio. Cece McDonald and Andrea Dworkins. Cece McDonald is an artist and activist committed to dismantling the prison industrial complex and winning the liberation of all oppressed people. As Black trans woman and a survivor of white supremacist and transphobic violence, these issues are core to Cece's personal and political life. The experience of criminalization and incarceration that she had led her through a brutal and violent system. And during her time in prison, her evocative and thoughtful writing inspired an international community of activists to come support the hashtag Free CC movement and to advance the broader movements for trans liberation and prison abolition. And Andrea Jenkins made history in 2017 as the first African American openly trans woman to be elected to office in the United States. In addition to representing Ward 8 and serving as the vice president of the Minneapolis City Council, she is a writer, performance artist, a brilliant poet, and a transgender activist. Monica Roberts and Peppermint. Monica Roberts was a transgender advocate and journalist who chronicled the lives and sometimes the deaths of trans people through her blog, Trans Griot. She died in October 5th at her home in Houston. She was 58. In West African tradition, a griot is a storyteller, and Ms. Roberts set out to tell the stories and history and lived experience of the transgender community. A proud, unapologetic Black trans woman speaking truth to power and discussing the world around her is how Ms. Roberts described her blog. Peppermint is an American actress, singer, songwriter, television personality, drag queen, and activist from New York City. She's best known from the nightlife scene and in 2017 as the runner-up on the 9th season of RuPaul's Drag Race. And in 2018, she made her debut in the Go-Go's inspired musical Head Over Heels as Pythio, becoming Broadway's first out trans woman to originate a lead role. Nala Toussaint and Iani Field Stewart. Nala Toussaint is a trans activist and organizer, and Iana Field Stewart founded the Okra Project, which serves Black trans people. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I'm here for any questions or comments you all might have. Let me unshare my screen. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I know it was a lot of material, it's very heavy, but aren't those women brilliant, and don't we need to protect our people?
Yes, Sam, it was a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say it was certainly good to learn about these things and learn about how you presented them and the different perspectives. If anybody does have a question, if you want to type your name in the chat box, or you can look at the bottom of your screen and you'll see a reaction button, and you can click that and you can raise your hand if anyone has any questions or comments. We've got one question, Sam. It is from Sarah. Sarah, I'm going to unmute you and let you ask your question. Okay, Sarah, and what was your question for Sam?
Hey everybody, we're here in the DA's office. Wondering if you can just define for the group the difference between the terms trans woman and trans femme.
Yes. A trans woman is someone who might identify as a woman, right? A femme is someone who might be non-binary, but leans towards the feminine side of the gender binary. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
And as you guys could see when Sarah popped on for just a minute, the DA's office is pictured there, and they were waving, hey everybody. They created their own watch party coming from live from the Durham DA's office. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
We appreciate it.
Truly.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys. Okay, Sherelle has a question, and Sherelle, you can also unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sam, that was an excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But when I think of the entire movement on a national level, I always try to bring things a little bit home, to home. And can you give us any perspective as to how the movement is working here in Durham?
In Durham.
Yeah, I mean, just a little, nothing, just give us a snapshot of how the movement is moving forward in Durham, please.
Sure, sure. That's a great question, Sherelle. Thanks for
Thank you.
asking. Yes, we have a strong and vibrant transgender community in Durham. I mean, I can't speak for the entire community, but I can say that, for instance, as you all are aware of, we have the LGBTQ Center, which is a fantastic resource and which is led by a non-binary trans femme person. And there's a lot of trans representation within that organization. So they are very active in the community. And yeah, so I guess that's what I would say, is that there are many trans people in Durham, and there is a vibrant activist community and very much aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement, I would say, which is still going strong here. I really appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. And please be sure to always keep your eyes and ears out on social media when we have events like this that come up in the future. Sam, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time in such an eloquent, poignant way with the group. It was very easy to take in and understand the information. And again, thank you to everybody else that joined us today. And in the meantime, until the next Lunch and Learn event, please take care, and thank you all for your support. Have a great day. Bye-bye.